Dear learners, welcome back to WSE English Story, where learning English becomes a doorway to unforgettable journeys. Today, we travel back almost 2 centuries, into a world without laptops, without the internet, without even electricity powering homes. And yet, in that world, a young woman imagined something extraordinary, a machine that could think, create, and even compose music. Her name was Ada Lovelace, and many today call her the first computer programmer in human history. But this is not just the story of a brilliant mind. It is the story of a girl born into conflict, raised between poetry and science, torn between society's expectations and her own burning imagination. It is a journey of courage, resilience, and a vision so far ahead of its time that the world needed more than a century to understand it. As you listen, you will not only improve your English, you will step into the life of a woman who dared to dream beyond the possible. A woman who asked questions others were too afraid to ask. A woman who proved that ideas, when protected and nurtured, can travel far beyond the limits of their age. If you'd like to support our work, you're welcome to like, comment, share, or join us. Your support truly helps us continue creating meaningful stories for learners around the world. Now, take a deep breath. Get ready for a story of genius, imagination, and unshakable determination. Let's begin the journey of Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace entered the world in 1815, during a time of great transformation. It was the early 19th century, when steam engines were reshaping cities and factories, and scientific curiosity was rising across Europe. Yet, despite these changes, society remained deeply traditional, especially for women. Education for girls was limited, often focused on music, embroidery, or manners. Science and mathematics were considered unsuitable, almost dangerous, for a proper lady. Against this backdrop, Ada's birth was already unusual. She was born Augusta Ada Byron, the daughter of 2 remarkable but very different parents. Her father was Lord Byron, the celebrated Romantic poet whose verses captivated Europe. He was passionate, unpredictable, and famously rebellious. Her mother, Annabella Milbanke, was intelligent, disciplined, and deeply invested in mathematics. In fact, Byron affectionately called her the Princess of Parallelograms, a playful reference to her logical mind. But the marriage between the poet of fire and the woman of logic collapsed quickly. Just weeks after Ada's birth, Byron left England, never to see his daughter again. Because of this painful separation, Ada grew up in a home filled with both love and tension. Annabella feared her daughter might inherit Byron's emotional turbulence, so she designed Ada's education with unusual strictness, pushing her toward mathematics, science, and rational thinking. Instead of poetry, Ada studied geometry. Instead of literary salons, she met engineers and tutors. Her lessons were carefully planned, almost like a scientific experiment to balance the imagination she had inherited from her father. At the same time, London itself was changing. The Industrial Revolution created new possibilities, new machines, and new scientific discussions in drawing rooms and academies. Curiosity about invention filled the air. And Ada, a quiet but observant girl, grew up listening to conversations about new engines, telescopes, factories, and discoveries that might one day reshape the world. Still, she felt the invisible walls around her. The expectations of society pressed in gently but firmly. A girl could be intelligent, yes, but not too intelligent. She could learn, but not surpass a man. She could wonder, but not dream too loudly. Yet in this world of both opportunity and limitation, Ada's imagination found room to grow. Her mother's rational discipline shaped her mind, while her father's poetic legacy whispered to her heart. Two forces, logic and imagination, were already beginning to weave together inside her, preparing her for the extraordinary vision she would one day reveal to the world. As we move forward, imagine this young girl, brilliant, curious, disciplined, yet full of quiet fire. And ask yourself, if you were her, living in a society that doubted your potential, what would you do with that inner spark? As Ada Lovelace entered her teenage years, the tension between who she was expected to be and who she longed to become grew stronger each day. Her mother's strict system of education, though meant to keep her balanced, also placed tremendous pressure on her young shoulders. Ada often felt caught between two worlds, the controlled, mathematical world Annabella demanded, and the limitless world of imagination that called to her like a distant melody. At 15, Ada began to show signs of deep intellectual hunger. She wanted to build things, to understand how the world worked, to explore ideas beyond textbooks. But such interests were considered unusual for a girl of her social class. Women were expected to focus on domestic skills and find suitable husbands, not study algebra or dream about flying machines. And yet Ada found herself captivated by the idea of invention. She devoured books on mechanics, engineering, and geometry, often staying awake long after her lessons ended. But her curiosity soon created conflict. Annabella, still haunted by Byron's emotional storms, watched Ada closely. Whenever Ada showed too much imagination, too much spark, her mother responded with stricter schedules, more tutors, and fewer moments for dreaming. She feared that imagination would lead Ada into instability. Ada felt this control deeply. She wanted to be free to think, to imagine, to create, but she also wanted her mother's approval. This internal struggle became her first great challenge, how to balance discipline with creativity, logic with dreams. Around this time, Ada developed a fascination with flight. She spent months studying birds, wings, and the mechanics of movement. She filled notebooks with sketches of wingspans, weight ratios, and mechanical ideas. In her youthful enthusiasm, she even created a plan for a flying machine powered by steam. She called this project Flyology. It was ambitious, imaginative, and wildly ahead of its time. But her mother viewed it as a dangerous distraction. One day, after discovering Ada deep in thought, surrounded by sketches of metal wings and wheels, Annabella stepped in firmly. She insisted Ada stop the experiments and return to proper lessons. Ada obeyed, but something important happened in that moment. She realized that the world around her feared her imagination. Not because it was wrong, but because it was powerful. It was during this period that Ada first sensed a deep injustice. She began to understand that her greatest gift, her mind, was also the very thing society wanted to limit. The more she learned, the more she realized how many doors were closed simply because she was a woman. This awareness planted a quiet determination inside her. She promised herself that she would not abandon her curiosity, even if the world tried to contain it. Years later, Ada would remember these early struggles as the time when she learned to push forward gently but steadily. She learned to think deeply, even in silence. She learned to keep her dreams burning, even when no one believed in them. And she learned something even more important, that imagination and logic did not need to fight each other. Together, they could become a force strong enough to change the world. As we move into the next chapter, imagine young Ada standing at her window, staring at the sky she longed to fly through. If you were in her place, feeling your ideas grow larger than the limits around you, how far would you go to protect them? As Ada Lovelace grew into a young woman, her hunger for knowledge only intensified. Her early struggle had taught her something essential: if society would not open doors for her, she would find her own way to push them open. And so began her first true intellectual journey, a journey shaped by courage, curiosity, and the quiet rebellion of a mind refusing to be limited. Her mother continued to supervise her education closely, hiring some of the finest tutors in England. At first, these tutors expected just another aristocratic girl with polite interests. But they soon discovered a mind that reached far beyond expectations. Ada asked unusual questions, often connecting mathematical ideas with metaphors, stories, and even musical patterns. Her tutors found it challenging and thrilling to teach her. She absorbed ideas quickly, then reshaped them with her imagination, giving them new life. At 17, Ada experienced a turning point that would guide her path for years to come. She was introduced to Mary Somerville, one of the most respected female scientists of the age. Meeting Mary was like discovering a lighthouse in a foggy sea. Here was a woman, powerful and brilliant, who had succeeded in a world that believed women should not study science. Mary treated Ada not as a child with strange interests, but as a young scholar with great potential. She encouraged Ada to explore mathematics more deeply. She explained new scientific theories to her. She welcomed Ada into intellectual circles usually reserved for men. It was through Mary that Ada entered the world of salons, elegant gatherings where scientists, inventors, and thinkers met to discuss the future. In these rooms, Ada found what she had always longed for, a space where her ideas were not just tolerated but appreciated. She listened to conversations about astronomy, mechanics, chemistry, and the latest inventions sweeping across Europe. Her mind lit up with possibilities. And then, one evening, something extraordinary happened. Mary Somerville introduced Ada to a man whose ideas would change her life forever, Charles Babbage, the brilliant mathematician and inventor who dreamed of creating revolutionary machines. When Ada first saw Babbage's difference engine, a mechanical device designed to calculate complex numbers, she was mesmerized. She studied the gears, the levers, the precision of movement, and felt a spark inside her. She understood its logic, and more importantly, she saw its potential. While others saw a calculator, Ada saw something more, a machine that could think in patterns, almost like a creative mind. She asked questions that surprised Babbage. She imagined future versions of the engine that could do more than mathematics. She wondered whether a machine could one day compose music or process symbols. Babbage was astonished by her insight. He later told friends that Ada was an enchantress of numbers. Their friendship became one of the most important intellectual collaborations of the 19th century. Babbage shared his ideas for an even more powerful machine, the analytical engine, a device that could follow instructions, change operations, and store information. Ada listened with shining eyes. She felt something opening inside her, a door she had been searching for since childhood. Her mind raced, connecting mathematics with imagination, logic with creativity, precision with art. But this journey was not easy. Social expectations still followed her everywhere. Even in intellectual circles, some men saw her as simply a clever lady, not a serious thinker. She had to work twice as hard to gain respect. At home, her roles as wife and mother demanded time and energy. Balancing her intellectual life with society's expectations became a daily challenge. But Ada refused to let go of her ideas. She read, studied, wrote letters, solved equations late into the night, and slowly built the foundation of the genius she would one day reveal to the world. As we move toward the next part of the story, think about Ada's situation, surrounded by brilliance, inspired by new possibilities, yet still constrained by the world around her. If you discovered a vision that could change the future, even if no one else could see it yet, would you still pursue it? The year was 1842, and Ada Lovelace, now in her late 20s, stood on the edge of the greatest intellectual moment of her life. Up to this point, she had explored mathematics with passion, studied advanced theories, and strengthened her collaboration with Charles Babbage. But it was one unexpected request, a task seemingly small and simple, that would unlock her destiny and change the history of computing forever. An Italian engineer, Luigi Minabrea, had written a detailed paper describing Babbage's analytical engine. The paper was technical, dense, and published only in French. Babbage needed someone to translate it into English for wider readers, and he thought of Ada. She had strong language skills, a sharp mind, and, most importantly, she understood the engine better than almost anyone else. What seemed like a straightforward translation soon became Ada's moment of revelation. As Ada worked through the text, something awakened inside her. She did not simply translate Minabrea's words, she expanded them. She identified gaps, clarified ideas, and began writing notes to explain and improve the original content. These notes grew longer and longer until they were more extensive than the original paper itself. By the time she finished, she had created a masterpiece so detailed and forward-thinking that even Babbage was astonished. These notes, known today as Notes A to G, were Ada's turning point. In them, she did something no one had ever done before. She explained how the analytical engine could follow a sequence of instructions to perform complex calculations. She described a method to make the machine repeat certain processes. Most importantly, she included a table of operations, a step-by-step plan for the engine to compute a long series of numbers. This was not just commentary. It was the world's first algorithm designed for a machine. In that moment, Ada Lovelace became the first computer programmer. But her achievement was deeper than a single algorithm. Her true breakthrough was philosophical. She understood that the analytical engine could manipulate symbols, not just numbers. If numbers could represent musical notes or letters, then the machine could process them too. This idea was wildly ahead of its time. It foreshadowed not only computers, but also modern coding, digital music, and even artificial intelligence. Yet, this turning point came with conflict. As Ada's notes were prepared for publication, Babbage wrote strong criticisms of the government and scientific institutions, blaming them for failing to support his work. He wanted Ada's publication to include his harsh political remarks. Ada refused. She believed that their work, the engine, the algorithms, the vision, should stand on its own. Mixing political attacks into scientific writing, she argued, would damage their credibility and overshadow the ideas they were trying to share. This disagreement created tension between the two collaborators. Babbage, proud and emotional, felt insulted. Ada, rational and determined, stood her ground. She insisted that the publication carry only her translation and notes. She had worked too hard, thought too deeply, and invested too much to let the project be derailed by criticism that had nothing to do with computation. It was the first time Ada truly claimed authorship of her own ideas. And for a woman in the Victorian era, where women could not speak publicly in scientific societies, publish as equals, or study at universities, this was a bold, revolutionary act. When the paper was finally published, signed simply AAL, it received admiration from many scholars. But few understood the depth of her vision. The world was not ready. Her ideas were too new, too vast, too different from anything people had imagined before. Yet Ada felt a sense of completion, as if she had finally stepped into the purpose she had been searching for since childhood. But destiny, as always, has a sharper edge. Soon after this triumph, Ada's health began to decline. She faced increasing pain, exhaustion, and moments when her strength seemed to disappear without warning. She tried to ignore it, focusing on plans to build a mathematical academy, collaborations with scientists, and even new theories she wanted to publish. But the struggle ahead would force her into the most difficult choices of her life. As we move into the next chapter, consider this: have you ever reached a moment where your greatest achievement and your greatest challenge appeared at the same time? How would you face it? The years following the publication of Ada Lovelace's notes were filled with both bright ambition and deepening struggle. Her mind surged with new ideas. She dreamed of expanding Babbage's engine, of collaborating with more scientists, of writing further essays that would push mathematics toward the future she sensed so clearly. But just as her intellect reached its peak, her body began its painful decline. Ada's health had always been fragile, but now the symptoms grew sharper. What started as exhaustion developed into chronic pain. Some days she could barely rise from bed. On others she forced herself to write, even as her hand trembled. Doctors offered limited treatments, often based on guesswork. Victorian medicine had no true cures, and some remedies only made her weaker. Ada fought desperately to keep her mind alive, but she was caught between two powerful forces, her soaring ambition and her failing health. This inner conflict became the defining struggle of her life. She feared that if she slowed down, she might lose the momentum she had worked so hard to build. She feared that the world, already skeptical of women in science, would forget her contributions if she disappeared from public view. And yet, she also feared that pushing herself too far could destroy what little health she had left. Her correspondence with Babbage became strained. Their earlier disagreements lingered, adding weight to her emotional burden. She longed for his support, for the companionship they once shared as the magician and the enchantress of numbers. But Babbage, facing his own frustrations and failures, had become distant. It was as if the very partnership that had brought her to greatness now existed in shadow. At home, Ada's responsibilities as a wife and mother grew heavier as her strength faded. Her husband, William King, admired her intelligence, but he also struggled to understand her relentless drive. The world expected her to be gentle, calm, and dutiful, not a visionary battling time itself. Ada felt torn between family love and intellectual passion, between her identity as a woman of her era and her identity as a thinker far ahead of her era. This conflict created painful moments of isolation. She felt trapped within expectations she never agreed to. She wanted to keep exploring the boundaries of mathematics, but her body often refused. She wanted to pursue new scientific projects, but society expected her to step quietly aside. Yet even in this darkness, Ada refused to surrender her mind. She spent her last years studying advanced mathematics, collaborating with professors, and drafting new theories on how machines might one day learn patterns, ideas so modern they would not be rediscovered until the 20th century. Her notes from this period reveal a mind burning with determination. She whispered to her tutors that she felt she was standing at the edge of something infinite. But the greatest moment of sacrifice came when she realized she could no longer escape her illness. She was forced to choose between fighting for her body and fighting for her ideas. In a quiet, heartbreaking moment, she chose her ideas. She used her remaining strength to write, to research, and to push her imagination as far as it could go. She accepted the pain, the exhaustion, and the shortening years in exchange for the chance to complete her intellectual journey. She knew she might never see the machines she imagined. She knew the world might not understand her work until long after she was gone. But she kept going. And then, near the end of her life, something remarkable happened. She made peace with her identity, not the identity society wanted for her, but the one she had carved out through sacrifice. Ada no longer saw herself only as Byron's daughter or as an aristocratic woman bound by rules. She saw herself as a pioneer standing at the threshold of a new world. A world of computation, algorithms, and symbolic machines that could one day change everything. Her conflict, between body and mind, expectation and ambition, the present and the future, reached its painful climax. Yet in her sacrifice, she preserved the spark of something immortal. As we move into the next part, think about this. If you knew your time was limited, but your ideas had the power to shape the future, would you fight for comfort, or for legacy? In the final years of Ada Lovelace's life, her physical strength faded, but her intellectual legacy began to shine with a strange, almost prophetic clarity. She did not live to see machines follow her instructions, nor to witness the rise of computation. Yet her greatest victory was something far deeper. She planted the seed of a future the world had not yet learned to imagine. When Ada's notes were published, few people recognized their significance. The scientific world was still rooted in gears, steam, and mechanical industry. The dream of a machine that could process symbols, store memory, repeat instructions, or even create patterns of its own was too distant, too abstract. But Ada had seen it. She had looked forward into the future and glimpsed the dawn of computer science almost a century before anyone else. Her victory began quietly. Scholars who studied her algorithm, the world's first, were astonished by its precision and structure. It was more than a calculation, it was a framework for programming. She had imagined loops, operations, and sequences of tasks long before such concepts had names. Her notes did what no one else had ever done, they turned imagination into instruction. Over time, mathematicians and thinkers began referencing her ideas, sometimes without fully understanding just how far she had gone. The analytical engine was never built, but Ada's theoretical vision survived. Long after her passing, her notes were rediscovered by scientists seeking to understand the origins of computation. And when they read her work, they realized that she had been speaking the language of the future. This rediscovery, nearly a century later, became Ada's second life, the moment when her achievements finally rose into the light. By the early 20th century, as technology advanced and the idea of programmable machines emerged, Ada's work became a guiding star. Historians and computer scientists were astonished that a Victorian woman, writing in the 1840s, had predicted the entire field. They called her the first computer programmer, a title she more than earned. Then something even more profound happened. Ada became a symbol. Her story spoke to people far beyond mathematics and engineering. She became an icon of resilience, creativity, and imagination. She represented those whose contributions go unrecognized, whose visions are ahead of their time, whose brilliance shines in silence before the world is ready to understand. Ada's victory was also personal. Despite society's limits, despite her health, despite living in an age that doubted women's intellectual power, she claimed her place in history. She did not break through the barriers of her era by force, she outthought them. She showed that logic and imagination are not enemies, but partners. She demonstrated that curiosity can be a form of courage, and that creativity is a kind of strength. And in the modern world, her influence continues to grow. Computer scientists celebrate her work. Universities teach her ideas. And every year, the world honors Ada Lovelace Day, dedicated to celebrating the achievements of women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Her victory echoes in every algorithm written today, in every technological breakthrough, in every machine built to think, compute, or create. The world of modern computing, from simple code to artificial intelligence, carries her fingerprint, subtle yet unmistakable. Ada did not live long. But her ideas have lived for generations, shaping the landscape of our digital era. As we move into the conclusion of her story, take a moment to reflect. What does it mean for someone to be so far ahead of their time that the world must grow for decades before it can understand them?